All right, John, you should still be able to hear me. We're getting ready to rock and
Yep.
roll
Okay.
in about 10 seconds here.
All righty.
And here we go.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is
Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.
I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Did you think no one was watching?
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
your mission.
Suppose we go where no man has gone before.
To reclaim the American dream,
To be given the right of human beings to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you're hearing his voice, you're hearing the voice of reason.
You've certainly come to the right place.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Hump Day Wednesday, wherever you are. I want to thank you for taking some time to spend with us this morning. You could have been anywhere in the world today, but you decided to spend time with us, and I greatly appreciate it. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with John Little. He's an education reform specialist. He is an activist. He is a community organizer. He's just one of those guys that if something needs to be done in your city, he is the guy to go to. He's the guy that gets it done. I had the pleasure of working with John some years ago. I was volunteering for a campaign. He was working on the campaign in South Florida, and I wanted to reach out to him with regard to some of the issues that are going on. Initially, when we set the show up, we wanted to talk expressly about education reform in Tennessee, but with all of the changes and things that are happening around the world, there's a lot of immediacy that we have to talk about Freddie Gray. So before I jump too far and too fast, John, thank you so much for joining this morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really good. It's a good morning. A lot of things are going on, and I'm
All right,
really
John,
interested.
it looks like I lost your audio signal. If you could just take a stab at that. And actually, you know what, John, it's not you, it's me. Once
Okay,
again,
what about now?
no, it was completely me. I have too many buttons over here. I did the same thing last week. Note to my producer and note to self: always click the right button when it's time for the show to start. So, John, one more time, how are you this morning?
I'm doing really good, really good. It's been a really crazy week going into Hump Day, and just interested to hear the different perspectives of everyone who talks about Freddie Gray and what's going on in Baltimore.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, there's so many different perspectives, so many different angles that this can be discussed from. And I know one of your expertise is one of the things that you focus on and that you work so hard for in Tennessee is education reform. And one of the most surprising things to me was the fact that it was a striking difference between yesterday and Monday, because on Monday, as I was reading and listening in to the broadcast, Monday, they let school out early. And
Right.
not only did they let school out early, but they also shut down the regular transit that most of these kids would use to get home. This is an urban area. This is a metropolitan urban area where most kids use public transportation. And so it was like this confluence of all of the perfect storm, if you would, where you have a bunch of kids who are already planning something that are let out of school early with nowhere to go, all released into one area of West Baltimore, and for all intents and purposes, chaos ensued. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think, the protest, right? Are
Mhm.
people right? Are people wrong? And then I think about me as a high schooler, and I think about opportunities that we have, and I think about no school, and I think about people trying to talk, and I think what happened is you saw the mom pull her son from the protest is that you have a lot of kids who really don't understand what's going on. They're kind of passionate about it, but it really gives them an opportunity to be influenced in a negative way.
Right, right. And I'm glad you made that distinction early on, because I almost went off on a tangent without pointing out the clear difference between protests and riots. And
Right.
that's one of the things that frustrates me a lot about the media is that they, and not just the media, but people in general in social media, because a lot of people have big voices, even if they're not on television. They're influential on social media. And so what they say reverberates through the social media sphere. A lot of people are intentionally conflating what happened on Monday with what happened on Saturday. Saturday were the peaceful protests. On Monday, you had a bunch of kids who got out and some wanting to express legitimate anger. I don't want to belittle the entirety of what happened on Monday, because some of those kids wanted to express their disgust, and some were just opportunists, obviously. But in general, where do you see that distinction being between riots and protests and the way the media is portraying the two?
It's a difficult situation because you have hundreds, you have thousands of people who are in the streets, and many who have a lot of different opinions. You have people there who are like Martin, and you have people who are like Malcolm, and everyone is being led by no one. There's no real leader leading this, and so you get into a weird situation where some people want to fight and some people want to just do the right thing and have civil disobedience. And what happens, you see the peaceful protests, and you see the people who are saying nonviolence, you see people coming together, you see people coming in, and then you see people angry, and they're throwing things, and they're breaking things, and they're setting things on fire. And it just, on my part, for me, it's rough. You don't know who, but you just know in the past, history repeats itself, and it's very hard for us to move forward with violence.
Right. And John, you know what? And because I don't think I gave you an apt enough introduction. And I want you to just tell us more about yourself, and what you've done and what you do, particularly with education reform and what you do in the community. I know what you do. I just started the show without my one sheet on you. So I want you to just tell our listeners exactly like who you are, what it is that you do, because I want them to understand where you're communicating from and the things that you're speaking about, because of your dedication to the community.
All right. So no one likes to talk about themselves, but I'm a native Nashvilleian. Went to a local college here at Tennessee State University, and I was in radio and broadcast. And I realized one day that, man, like the community really needed help. And so I got involved in politics, and I found my way down in Florida working on a congressional race. And I was like, man, like politics is great, but it's, as I go door to door and I talk to voters and I look at these communities, I just realized voting for a presidential candidate, a mayor, a council person, it just wasn't enough to really grow the community and get them educated and involved. And so I went back to school for education, and I realized that, wow, like this is an opportunity where you have a kid, whether they be in elementary, middle school, or high school, you really have an opportunity to mentor them. And so I went back and I started working in charter schools here in Tennessee. With that, I still had a passion for politics. And what I started to do, I started to combine those two things together, because I thought with a parent, you can educate, you can engage, and you can empower. And the true way to empower is through education and then electing officials that you're educated about. And so for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been really involved in local politics, but I've also been involved in the education reform movement of making sure kids are getting a quality education. We know the prison to pipeline deal is real, and anything that I can do to slow that down and really stop it, that's what I want to be a part of.
Okay, so since we first met in South Florida, you went back and got another degree, or just got another certification in education? What was that?
So I'm about a semester away from getting my master's in education, and working at a school while I was getting my master's, it helped me realize that this was ground zero. It's very rare that a person with a college degree commits a murder. Things happen, but it truly diminishes that opportunity. And so my fight right now is not on the political battlefield, is inside the classroom and inside those communities.
And I think that's it. First of all, let me applaud you, man, because I did a stint inside of the school system. And any of my old colleagues that are listening in, don't say anything. Don't tell anybody about my time there. I was a very effective teacher, but my methods were not conducive to protocol. Let's just say that, because I worked in a very underprivileged, at-risk community. And sometimes I had to handle them with open hand and closed fists, rhetorically speaking. And so I have to applaud anyone who has that commitment to education on that level, because that is so much more difficult than a lot of people will ever admit. We talk about what teachers get paid, we talk about what administrators get paid, and the fact of the matter is, for the sacrifice and the level of difficulty and the commitment, it is a huge commitment of their life. I just don't think we pay teachers enough, and so I want to thank you for what you're doing in that regard. Now, so that people understand who you are, where you are, you come from a political background, you come from an education background, and because these were kids, a lot of people wanted to make this seem like it was adults, but these were high school kids. You could see SpongeBob backpacks on some of these kids out here rioting and looting. And so what happens, I have my idea, right? But I want to know from you, what happens in the mind of a child, of a kid, of a teenager, because at that age they would be treated like adults. What happens that they are able, how do they get the opportunity to organize something so large and the response be rather inadequate? So on this, not only on the police level, but I'm talking about on the school, on the education level.
Yeah. So kids organize fast. In our age group, we organize fast through Facebook. They have things called Kik, Snapchat. I mean, it only takes a few messages to start to get out and say, this is where we're going to meet and this is what we're going to do. Or just to be in your neighborhood and say, hey, like I heard they're doing protesting downtown, let's go downtown. And so when you look at those kids and you see them out there, you just say, this is just a prime opportunity. It's an open air opportunity. And I think not to place blame on the administration of the government, but literally it's people who get paid to sit back and think and say, what can go wrong today? What are we not doing? What are we doing really well and what are we doing wrong? And as you think about a lot of thousands and thousands of high school kids who have nothing to do, the transportation has been shut down, you can only say they're not going to stay at home and play video games. They're going to get out into the community because this was a big issue.
Right. And that's what I clearly remember. Actually, let me cast it not only in the light of the kids, but adults. We also respond to large events. Anything that is outside of the norm. It's like a fire drill.
Right.
Kids get excited about fire drills, but adults get excited about fire drills because it's a break from the norm and it's a break from the monotony and it's an opportunity to do something different. Now, not a lot of people are going to escalate to burning buildings down, but you have to, if you mix in the excitement of something big happening in with the youthful rebellion and youthful anger, then I think you get this confluence of influences that can lead to what we saw on Monday. And so here's my question. If they saw that this was primarily youth doing this on Monday, why would the school board cancel school the next day? I mean, in hindsight, it looks like it worked. I didn't see a lot of kids in the streets rioting on yesterday, but it just seems counterintuitive. What was the thinking in that?
When you think about the school system, they have a high liability, and their decision to cancel school might not have been the best decision for the general population, but for the true liability of the school, of having a kid on a bus or having something happen at a school where someone gets hurt, they made the decision within their own personal liability to shut it down. And Do I agree what they did? No. Do I see where they're coming from? Yes. What would have been a better alternative? The better alternative would have been able to communicate out to the parents through your robocalls, through notes, through personal phone calls from the school to let them know, number one, why they were shutting the school down, but two, best use practices on what parents should do in order to keep kids from coming into this whole protest and riot thing and causing issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Something different should have been done. But in hindsight, it looks like it worked out. Okay, so we're going to take a break, man. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to shift to the media narrative because I know, in working in politics that you have some experience with media and you understand how the media can cast a story to be entirely different than the reality. So we're going to talk about the media narratives behind what's happening in Baltimore, even still this morning. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the education reform efforts that you're working on there in Tennessee. Ladies and gentlemen, I have John Little. He is joining us live via Google Hangouts. You can watch us live on YouTube right now. There's a link on the events page, and we're also streaming live over Spreaker. We want to thank you. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show. We will be back after this break. John.
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me. All right, two things. If you can move a little closer to your microphone and you could, and whatever you're comfortable with, but look directly into your camera whenever you can.
Okay.
When you're ready to lose weight, why
what about now? Can you hear me?
over every meal? Jenny Craig makes it simple. Just walk into a neighborhood Jenny Craig center or give us a call. You'll meet your dedicated personal consultant who helps you reach your goals. Together, you'll pick out delicious Jenny Craig foods that you'll love and design a menu that fits your life. And the best part is that you can get started losing weight right away. Don't wait any longer to take advantage of our best offer ever. Call 1-800-JENNY20 or visit jennycraig.com.
This is the sound of salmonella gyrating on your undercooked chicken. And it looks like Mom might be taking it out a little early. Don't let salmonella get funky with your chicken. On average, 1 in 6 Americans will get a foodborne illness this year. So use a thermometer to cook each type of meat to the right temperature. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov. Brought to you by the USDA, HHS, and the Ad Council.
On the next episode of Recipes for Disaster.
I'm making beef sliders for my friend Sandy. Nana taught me to always pull meat off the grill early so it's extra juicy.
Use a food thermometer to ensure ground beef is 160 degrees, or you could make people really sick. Sandy didn't think twice about the slider she ate until yoga class, when a nasty case of food poisoning turned her downward-facing dog into upward-moving lunch. Watch Recipes for Disaster at foodsafety.gov and learn the steps Maria unwittingly leaves out. Brought to you by the USDA, HHS, and the Ad Council.
When I grow up, I want to be a new pair of blue jeans.
When I grow up, I want to be a kid's first computer.
I want to be a warm place on a
I
cold
want to be
day.
a football
I want to be
stadium.
a bike that races around the country.
I want to be a bench on a forest trail.
When I grow up, I don't want to be a piece of garbage. And if you recycle me, I won't be.
Give your garbage another life. Recycle. Learn how at iwanttoberecycled.org. Brought to you by Keep America Beautiful and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you're hearing his voice, you're hearing the voice of reason.
Welcome back. So one of the things, John, that bothers me the most about what's happening in Baltimore, and not just Baltimore, we see this everywhere, is are the many false narratives that are, I think, intentionally promoted by the media and by people on social media. And the most glaring, actually, two that stand out the most to me. One of the my assistant producers sent me over 2 articles. The first is Saturday, where there were thousands of people who protested with legitimate grievances, and they protested peacefully with the exception of a very small few. And even with that very small few who are now being cast as they're being cast as violent, no one is giving the context for which they became violent.
Right.
And you see the images of the people at the ball game on Saturday, where there's this white guy struggling with the black guy, and then you see black people throwing stuff. But what no one is saying is all of the things that led up to those moments of violence, which included the fans calling the protesters racial slurs, the obvious racial slur, throwing beer on them. And then once they provoke, and that's one of my big things, is how people talk about an incident but never talk about how it was provoked. Once they provoked a reaction, then they were able to forward this narrative that the protests were violent, and then they push it over into the area of a riot so it could be dismissed. Now, that's my observation. And you're from a political perspective and your time in the political sphere, why is it that they find it necessary to spin a negative light onto legitimate protests?
People fear what they don't understand, and that's why people always make a big push to have more diversity in media and more diversity in leadership, like the police force. One thing that really stood out to me going all the way back to Ferguson is during the St. Louis Cardinals. It was the playoffs. Ferguson was really hard at the time, and they were coming peacefully, but protesters came to the St. Louis Cardinal games to protest, but in a peaceful way. And they were called racial slurs. Things were hurled at them. They were mocked. And I just sit back and said, man, like, is that necessary? And what does that say to me as a black man, as I see a white man who doesn't understand the struggle of why we're angry and why we're protesting? You know, we could care less about the baseball game. But for them, the baseball game is super important. It's the playoffs. And so it's a very huge disconnect, and I think that carries on, and it's very similar to what goes on in Baltimore and with the Orioles game.
Right. One of the things that that I was touched by the most was, I believe it was the VP of operations at for the Baltimore Orioles, where he basically said that we'll be okay. You know, don't worry about the game being canceled. Let's worry about the economic disparities that we see.
Right.
There's a reason that these guys are protesting. There's a reason that there's this unrest. So let's focus on that and not be so distracted by the fact that we had to cancel a game. I think that spoke volumes, especially because their fans were really not, and I don't want to speak categorically of them, but a group of fans were very vitriolic towards the protesters and incited the violence. See, that's a big thing for me. Is like, if you incite violence, you don't later on get to call yourself a victim. And that's what I saw with the narrative. So I like what you said, that it's the fact that people fear what they don't understand. And because of a lack of diversity, it's difficult for them to understand why so many African Americans, Black Americans are upset about this reoccurring. Now, are we? I know we're not, but I just want to ask you: are we crazy? Are we just seeing things? Is there not really an issue? Yeah,
this is scary, and this is something I deal with personally in the workplace. It's very hard to turn on social media and watch a guy get shot in the back with there was supposed to be a taser, but it was a gun. And as the guy is losing his life, and he makes a comment to say, not that I can't breathe, but I'm losing my breath. And the guy says, F your breath.
Right.
As a Black man, it's very hard to look at that after Ferguson, after Trayvon Martin, after things that happened in New York. And so for us to continue to see these images and these issues, it makes it very hard not to take a strong stance on it.
I mean, exactly. Like what bothers me the most is the fact that people want to view these things in isolation. But this is not, you cannot look at this in isolation. This is first of all, people, I don't know if many people who have said this, but I know people are thinking this. There is a direct connection between the legacy of Jim Crow, lynchings, and the police force being the arm that executed those lynchings. We're not suspicious of the police because of recent events. You know, there is a legacy that has not had a chance to be rebirthed because it didn't stop after Jim Crow. It continued in the 70s. It continued in the 80s. We only started seeing it because of video in the 90s, and now we're seeing it on a regular basis. Let me start that sentence over. There is a direct connection. There is a direct connection between the past, the present, and we're concerned about the future. So my question to you then is, how do we help people, or should we even be concerned about helping people understand why we are concerned, why it is that we are we at the point where if they just don't see it, it's because they don't want to see it?
Yeah. So history repeats itself, and I'm a big history buff. And if you look at things like COINTELPRO, the Congressional Intelligence Program, from the federal government specifically targeted not bad Black people, just people who were organized in the community and who were building leadership, and they organized against these people out of fear. And so that's something that came out after the files were declassified. And so I don't know if it is going on today, but if history repeats itself, there are similar programs that say, you show strength in numbers and we need to squash that because we don't want to move it. And it goes all the way back to Nat Turner. I mean, history repeats itself.
And that's the thing. People are trying to consistently convince us that we are seeing things, or we're seeing the face of Jesus in a toast, that kind of thing. Like we're conspiracy theorists. But there is a historical precedent. There is a consistent number of events that has happened over the years, over the decades, over the centuries, where this is not without precedent. And so for us to have to explain to people why it is that we are upset, or why it is that people would be angry, I think is kind of ridiculous at this point, because if you don't see it by now, you just don't want to see it.
Right. A gentleman yesterday, I was just going through my news media. I want to say his name was D-Ray, don't know his last name. He was from Baltimore. I think he took a group of students, and him and Wolf Blitzer got into a debate. And he essentially said, man, you crying about broken windows.
Yeah.
And when I'm talking about broken spines,
yeah,
it's apples and oranges.
Yeah, yeah.
So many broken spines have happened. We could care less about the broken windows.
Yeah, I want to play that clip. And actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. That was by DeRay McKesson. DeRay is a community organizer, and he is one of the people who are on the front lines of Ferguson. And he went over to Ferguson. However, he lives in Baltimore and works in Baltimore. So this came to him in Baltimore. But while I pull up that clip, I think that is very apt that people are so concerned about the broken glass with very little, if any, concern with the fact that this guy's spine was broken.
Right.
To me, it just shows the priorities. The priority is on property and not human life, which, if you talk about in the context of education reform, I did a show a couple of months back, or a month or so ago, on Texas. Texas has I don't know if the governor has signed it, but they passed a piece of legislation that allows teachers to use deadly force to protect school property, not just to protect their lives, but to protect school property. So where are we going with this thing where we are placing more value on property than on human life?
I mean, we're going to a very bad place, and we're actually going backwards with progress. When you give people, the stand your ground laws that say, let's create something that is under the radar. But if it happens, when the whole Trayvon Martin case and legal experts looked at it, they said, man, the law is the law, and that's what the law is. and it's going to be very hard to convict Trayvon Martin's killer. And so when you look at laws in Texas, you look to see that's where a high minority population is. This is not a law that would be adverse against anyone outside of being a minority when you talk about protecting property.
Exactly. That's the thing that gets me, is that this is going to disproportionately affect minorities, especially at times like this, because now let's say that they had burned a school down.
Right.
Then if they were in Texas, then some teacher could have had gone and killed students under the protection of the law because they were destroying school property. Got that clip here of DeRay McKesson, and I'm going to play it. It's well, there's some things that are said there, but most of this is over the internet. We'll be okay. Let's listen to it. Okay, YouTube, you probably can't hear this. So I'll post the video link later so that you can see, but I'm playing it now for our radio audience. And DeRay is doing communicating with Wolf Blitzer. So let's give us a moment. As soon as this clip is over, we'll be right back to finish the conversation. That's DeRay. That's DeRay McKesson. Wolf Blitzer set himself up. I guess maybe he didn't realize who he was dealing with, because DeRay has been on the front line long enough to to be able to handle reporters. And for the people on YouTube, let me repeat what happened. And you can see the clip. It's all over social media right now. But DeRay was asked by Wolf Blitzer. He was setting up a loaded question, basically saying, well, the 15 police officers who were injured, all the property damage, all of the fires, that's not okay, is it? He said that's not acceptable, right? And DeRay came back so quickly without even a second's hesitation. He said, right, but the 100 people who have been killed by the Baltimore Police Department, that's not okay, is it? Right? So he came back with very pertinent, real information that was being dismissed in exchange for the narrative of broken windows and burnt down buildings. Why are we so obsessed with this idea of protecting our front lawn, which I understand? You know, if you own anything, you want to protect it, but are you going to protect it to the extent that you put value over human life? John.
Man, couldn't have said it any better. And I think that's where the narrative gets lost in media when they want to make a story and they want to talk about the officers. You know, just what I do, the reason, you know, I was involved in politics first, because it's an outlet to really get things done. The reason I went back to get education was like, it's an outlet to get things done. And so combining those two helps us, because a kid that is not educated is not going to be able to produce in this world, because it's set out against them already. And as you look at Ferguson and as you look at Baltimore, and you look at the political dynamics and you look at the police department. And so in Ferguson, you had a majority minority community, but the police force was majority Caucasian.
Right.
I think politics, and now this is why I brought back up Ferguson, because those guys got it. They said, man, we have been getting screwed for so long. And in this last election, those guys were able to really come back and elect 3 people to the council to create a balance. And so politically, if something happens policy-wise, because we got to know that policy is what dictates the future, Now they have people at the table who have empathy and who are going to stand up and fight for what is right. And as you look at Baltimore, they have a black mayor. And right now she's really confused, and my heart goes out to her because she's in a really, really difficult situation.
Yeah.
But this is an opportunity, a true opportunity for them to say, what is wrong? What is going wrong in Baltimore? And how can we fix this through education?
Yeah, she's definitely stuck in a bad place. First of all, she sometimes when you talk off the cuff, you say things, right? She said that she wanted to give them room to destroy. Now, I think anyone in the right mind realizes that that's not what she intended to convey. However, that is what she conveyed, you know, and once those words are gone, you can't take them back. So that's what she said, and she has to own up to those things. But the difficult part that I see for her now, and I think things have subsided. I think there's I think there's going to be peace going forward. I don't think any more riots are going to break out, at least this week. But she was stuck in this place between the demands of the city to protect the property and the life of everyone else, and the grievances that are being expressed by legitimate protesters and people who are simply rioting. Because as DeRay put it, he expressed it so eloquently. He said, I don't have to condone it to understand it. And so he was saying, I don't condone the rioting, but I understand the rioting. Sometimes we completely dismiss the experiences and the anger and the frustration, particularly of black people, in exchange for, well, what about the property? And that is what is one of the most absurd things of this entire narrative of Baltimore. And that's what she's stuck between the rock and a hard place. Now, I want your opinion on this, because as soon as she said this word, I was ready to throw something at the TV. And matter of fact, I think I changed it. When I think she fell over into the trap, the trap of the thug, and because she gave this comment about we're not going to let, and she thought about it, and then she really just went with it and said thugs run our city, or something to that effect. In your opinion, what is the problem with that word and what it conveys?
I mean, to me personally, and I'll just say it, I think it puts a tag on Black people who express emotion. And what I love about the internet now and how fast they discredit something like that, when they show University of Kentucky students burning up the city because they lost a basketball game. Not because they lost a life, because they lost a basketball game. And what was happening in Kentucky looked like the same thing that was happening in Baltimore. But those kids in Kentucky were not called thugs. They were called something, college students gone wild.
Revels or reveling or something, or misguided youth is
right.
With. And the distinct disparity between how they were treated versus how these kids in Baltimore were treated. I think at the undercurrent is this, because the actions were the same. I mean, there's plenty of examples of looting. There were plenty of examples of police officers being harmed, plenty of examples of property being burned and destroyed after a sporting event. But no one called out the National Guard. No one called out, 5,000 additional troops from across the city. It's the very core of the dissent. Actually, because there's not even dissent. There is no dissent. There's no grievance with regard to these sporting events that makes these young white kids lose their mind. They're just upset because they lost a game. But you have a group of people who are disenfranchised, who are expressing their anger through the same type of activities. And now we have to call the National Guard out because everybody is afraid, because people who are disenfranchised are now getting and gaining their voice. Some are expressing it through protests. Others are expressing it through riots. And all of us are labeled as thugs in the process. John, we're going to come back after one more break. When we come back, I want us to shift over to education reform in Tennessee, and want you to help us understand why it's important and what type of reform needs to take place. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to join the conversation, 857-600-0518. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show.
You're tuned in to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Join the conversation. 857-600-0518.
Looking for the right business opportunity? Need the right product, the right marketing plan, and the absolute best training in the world? Well, look no further. The Elite Team. Every leader in time excels. They believe the key ingredients in becoming successful in life and in business are just a keystroke away. Go to www.eliteteamsite.com. That's www.eliteteamsite.com. The Elite Team has a system in place that will move you closer to achieving your goals and dreams. Visit www.eliteteamsite.com or TonyFlemingEnterprises.com today.
College is important, but it can also be expensive. College Planning Services is a group of educators, administrators, counselors, and other licensed professionals that work together to provide the necessary services, networks, and information to reach students that are serious about getting a college education. College Planning Services partners with financial institutions, corporate sponsors, and other major players in the global market to strategize in building a pool of information regarding financial aid, scholarships, and funding information to assist students in preparing to access the essential resources to build upon their path to an educational future. Learn more at collegeplanningtoday.com and let us help you start your college career.
Do you want to take your business to the next level? Ultimate Business Solutions provides the support you need to increase your customer base and sell more products and services online. Specializing in graphic arts, web development, and internet marketing, Ultimate Business Solutions creates the face of your business. If you're looking for a custom logo, dynamic website, or popping marketing material, call Ultimate Business Solutions today at 404-704-2197 or visit www.ultimatebizsolutions.com. Ultimate Business Solutions. Let us create your future.
Do you have tax issues, owe back taxes, or need tax relief? Contact L&B Tax Service today. L&B offers you over 15 years of expertise and first-class tax service for individuals, professionals, and business owners. With nationwide service, you can easily find a location near you. Contact one of our tax professionals through our website, lbtaxservice.com. That's www.lbtaxservice.com. L&B Tax Service Incorporated. Tax professionals that you can trust.
You've tuned in to the Benjamin Dixon Show.
All right. Welcome back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm still on the line here with John Little from Tennessee. He's a, he is a political / education reform activist, organizer, community leader. So, John, in light of everything that's currently happening in Baltimore, right, and the strong component of the strong representation of kids that were in the riots on Monday, with all of the policies we saw happening with them letting them out of school early, and with the fact that they canceled school the next day, there is a strong narrative of education reform that is necessary to not only give better and stronger leadership, but also to give better and stronger opportunities to our kids. So in Tennessee, tell us what you're working on with regard to education reform and how that can be applicable to what's happening in the broader narrative of police violence.
In Tennessee, we have a lot of people here at the table who believe, through research, through support from around the country, of the cradle to prison pipeline. And when you look at numbers of minority students in schools, the numbers do not look good for the future. The numbers do not look good for the future of what we're doing. And so there's been a big move to say, how can we incorporate high quality education back into our school system? And it's done through a number of things, but one of the things that I'm truly working on that gets flack and support are charter schools. In charter schools in Tennessee, based on, it's a study called Credo that Stanford does. And our charter schools here that are educating the most at-risk youth are crushing it. And when I say crushing it, academically, they're outperforming their counterparts inside the classroom.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I worked for a nonprofit organization that also managed a charter school, and there's generally this idea that charter schools are that's one of the places that the Black community is divided with
Right.
Progressives, when generally we're aligned with progressives on almost every single issue. But it
Right.
seems like charter schools is one of them. Could you speak to that
Yeah.
divide?
Yeah, messaging in media matters. This is what they say. They say we need our strong public education system because we have so many fixed costs, and we have this, but it's almost the same where Wolf and D-Ray were debating. For them, it was about broken windows and broken spines. For us, it's really about education system. Is not about a building, it's about the students who are in the building. And what I hear a lot of times when people talk about traditional public schools or public charter schools is that they care about the fixed cost and not the students.
Okay, so because charter schools ostensibly take funds away from existing public schools,
right,
there's concern that charter schools will have an adverse effect on the public schools, but it's generally the effect of infrastructures and buildings and those types of funds. And when you're saying that charter schools have the potential, or we documented that charter schools perform better, particularly for communities of color, I want to make sure that that's what I'm hearing, and make sure that my conclusion is correct.
Right. And just a disclaimer. So I'm a fan of anything that's going to really help our kids get out of the despair that they're in right now. If it's a traditional public school, a optional magnet program, a private school, whatever works, we just need help. But I think for us, people have controlled the narrative too much, again, to make it us versus them. When I say you have to take this into your own kids, and you got to say, if the school right up the street is my traditional public school, but the results are really bad, am I going to send my son or daughter to that school? Or if I can go around the other side of the corner and there's a charter school or private school or any school, and they will welcome my kid, which school am I going to send my child to? And every day, you're going to make the choice to send your child to the best education institution is best for them.
You know what I'd like to do? Would be to bring in someone from the progressive left who is a public school advocate, and have you debate with them, because this is one of those things. Like, I'm on the fence about it, only because of I know the impact I know the motivations of some of the people who are funneling these funds from public schools to charter schools. They're not funneling these funds necessarily to help our kids. Sometimes they're funneling these funds to take away from the public school system and to weaken the public school system. And by virtue of doing that, weaken the teachers union, and by virtue of doing that, weaken the Democratic Party, and by virtue of doing that, weaken the progressive movement in general. So there are a lot of people in the progressive ideology, and I do see that connection, but then I also see the fact that public schools aren't doing what needs to be done for our kids. So where is the balance? What do you say to a teachers union representative or president or who sees what I just outlined, who sees the connection between Republicans trying to defund them for political reasons, but then there's a balance of they're not performing for our kids?
Yeah, it's a balance. And so I support the teachers union, but one thing that I've learned about the teachers union is that they only support teachers and they don't support students. And so that's one thing we have to realize. Their main mission and main goal is to support teachers, even if it's not going well. And when you think about, and I just like to be honest and upfront, I think there's snake oil salesmen on both sides. And so in our public school system, that's an institution that has been around since our country has started, there have been people who have profited millions on millions of dollars off our public school kids. And I think on the side of education reform, there are people who are profiting. But Only thing that I say is with charter schools and why I support, it has autonomy, it has accountability. And I say if a charter school is not performing academically and they're not doing a service based on what they stated they would do, that charter school needs to be shut down. But at the same time, there are traditional public schools that have been underperforming our community since the beginning of time, since desegregation in the 60s. And I don't think nothing is done about it. And that's a disservice, a long time disservice.
Wow. And that's absolutely true. There's no question that the public schools have started failing our kids, and it's more, there's so many more things that are affect that reality. It's not just the schools themselves, because I've worked in a public school in the worst communities, and I realized I'm not just up against a weak salary with weak resources. I'm fighting against a subculture that strips away anything I teach them in the day. When they go home to not having power, they go home to not having a place to sleep, they go home to not having anywhere to wash their clothes, they go home and they're hungry. The last thing they're going to do is think about education. And that in itself, to me, speaks to the depth of the problem. And so my question is, what is it about the charter schools then that seems to offer a viable solution? Or are they offering a viable solution in the same exact scenario, right? Put a charter school in the worst neighborhood right next to a public school. Do you think that there's something inherently productive about a charter school that will yield different results than it would if it had the exact same, like we did an experiment?
Right. I think leadership matters. And I think, so the National Charter School Movement, the data and the results have come out, and they say that it doesn't make a big difference. There are gains in the charter schools over traditional public schools, but it's not a significant gain. In Tennessee, that's quite the opposite. In Tennessee, our charter schools are outperforming our traditional public schools with the same kids from the same neighborhoods and zip codes. And they're doing it because you have a new generation of charter school leaders. They're young, they're ambitious, and they want to change the world. And when you have those components that come into a school and give it heart, it creates such a big difference because it's not just about what happens in those four walls of the school. They're very active in the community. They're doing home visits, they're doing community events, they're making phone calls to parents, and they're holding the parents as partners and not just speaking down to the parents, but saying, we're in this together to make sure that your kid and my student reach the level of education attainment, whether it's college or the job force.
So if this is something that is not inherent to, and I'm playing the devil's advocate, because I want to get you back for a real debate with, and we'll do it live on air with a, let's say a teachers union rep or someone who represents the opposite side of the argument. But if it's about leadership, and it's about the passion, and it's about the direction, and it's about the vision that's being brought, is it something that can be duplicated in public schools?
Yes. Charter schools were created to be a learning lab for public schools. I think what happened early on, that competition component came into play. And so instead of saying, hey, like these guys just came in and in 2 years they have outperformed us and said, hey, come over here and teach us, it was almost like, what can we say to discredit what they're doing so we won't look so bad? But in a perfect world, there's collaboration amongst the two. For me, it's no way charter schools can be a whole public school system. Then you become a system within itself. And so I think charter schools are here to make sure that we're doing innovative things in the classroom, which a lot of them are. And then they're taking those best used practices and taking it over to the traditional public school. We need a strong public school system, but right now, if it's not there, we need options for our kids so parents won't send them to a failing school.
Okay, so then let me go one step further then, because I'm all about the politics at this point in my life. So what do you say? Where do you see the balance? How do we keep charter school funds from being used as a political tool to weaken public schools in general, but public teacher unions in specific? How do we keep the progress that is being made in charter schools, which we need to help our communities, no questions asked, but at the same time, how do we keep it from breaking the teachers union, which is generally one of the strongest supporters of all things progressive?
Right. I think leadership matters. And so you need someone who is not wed and in bed with the traditional public schools, or not wed and in bed with the public charter schools. I think there are people on both sides who do a detriment. I've been in meetings with public school people where I hear, we should eradicate charter schools. And I've been in meetings with charter school people who say we should eradicate traditional public schools. And I think both of them are wrong. And my whole big play on the teachers union is we need to change the narrative. And it's just like, it's not about the teachers. It's not about their jobs. It's about who is in the classroom and they're educating children and they're doing it in a great way. And we need to take what they're doing and we need to replicate that. But I think it's time for the teachers union just to say that we're in the business of supporting not only our teachers, but we're supporting students, and they need to have some type of action. I think they're starting to send the wrong message when you have a poor performing teacher. Everyone doesn't need to be in the classroom, like everyone doesn't need to be in leadership. And I've never heard.
Absolutely. I'm one of those. I did not need to be in the classroom, so I'll testify to that. Go ahead, man. Sorry.
But in closing, the teachers union will never come out and say, Ben, we love you to death. You're our friend. You're going to do great things in life for this world. It's just not going to be
classroom.
And until we start to say that, it's going to be a hard course for us to meet together and collaborate.
And just to be clear, because I have to, I was a great teacher. The kids connected with me. I connected with the kids. It just, to me, it was a level of frustration that wasn't commensurate with the pay. And because of that, you get a lot of teachers who get burned out. And once a teacher gets burned out, it's almost worse than when a police officer gets burned out. Now, granted, a police officer can take your life, but a teacher can take your future as well. A bad teacher can set you on a path that will ultimately lead you to the police. And so we have to be careful not to burn out our teachers, not to burn out any of our public servants, because that's what they're doing. So, John, I you know what? I wish we had the entire hour to talk specifically about this, because I think it is a conversation that represents what another type of erased intersection, and my producer hates when I use that phrase, but by erased intersection, it's really the place where a subset of our larger group lives, and sometimes we disregard it. And I think this is a perfect example, because we do have the issues with progressives, liberals, Democrats, whatever you want to call us in general, or them in general, being concerned about the teachers union, but at the same time, they kind of erase the importance by focusing so hard only on the teachers union. It seems like sometimes they erase the focus off of the children, but then we have the flip side of the argument where charter schools have been used as a tool of taking funds from the public school system, which weakens. So there's so many complicated things that are happening in your world, and I would love to have you back to speak on it more, and to go head to head with and when I say head to head, it's radio.
A good public debate.
Yeah, exactly. A good, robust public debate with someone from the opposite side of the debate. Because what's interesting is we're not talking about the difference between a progressive and a conservative. This is a conversation that is held in progressive circles, particularly in the African-American niche, because of demographic, because of the failing schools in African-American communities and the potential that charter schools have to help the African-American community. I hope I cast that in a light that is most inclusive and most representative of the whole story. And I appreciate you, John, coming on and sharing your portion and your experience and your expertise. So All right, John, I'm going to be in touch with you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is John Little. He's from Tennessee. He obviously knows his stuff with regard to education reform. We're going to get him back on the show. I didn't realize I only have about 60 seconds left, or less, 40 seconds left. So I want everyone to go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com. I want you to sign up for our blog. And in our blog, we will give you all the information about all the different places and social media that you can connect with us. I'll also send you out some information on John Little, what he's working on, and how you can connect with him. We want you to connect with him and pick his brain and get some insight from a different side of the argument. And we will also send you information on how you can support the Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like what we're doing and you like what you see, we want you to be a part of it. So go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com. This is your boy, Benjamin Dixon, and we will see you on Friday at 7:30. Oh, Friday at 7:30, we have a great conversation talking about the decriminalization of marijuana here in the state of Massachusetts. So you definitely want to be there and be a part of that. Thanks a lot, John. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Take care. This is the Benjamin Dixon Show.
And until that moment, when we, the Americans, are able to accept the fact that on that continent we are trying to forge a new identity in which we need each other, that I am not a ward of America. I am one of the people who built it again. Until this moment.
That we are brothers. It's not a question of Jews or Christians or Muslims. We're all in the same boat.
Which we need each other.
Love is a condition so powerful. It may be that which holds the stars in the firmament.
Until this moment.
Love.
Until this moment.
Love.
Until this moment.
I come to you today to say that we can build a newer and better nation. I say we can do so, that we must do so, and that we will do so.
You've tuned in to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at www.thebenjamindixonshow.com.